Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan, and I'm delighted to be with you again another Tuesday. Have my co-host.
Well, good evening, Dr. J.R. Ficklin, and I'm so glad to be back with you in 2021.
I missed you last week.
And I was missing you all last week, but I'm so glad that I'm much better today than I was last week. And I'm excited. I'm excited to be here
Yes,
today
so much has happened in just a week.
in our
Our,
week.
our nation's capital was under siege, and I just wanted to say my deepest condolences to Brian Sidnick and his family. He lost his life, a police officer defending our nation's capital, and heartfelt um, well wishes to those law enforcements that were attacked and were beaten during that time. I wish you speedy recovery and thank you so much for standing in the gap for us.
Absolutely. Dr. Val, I so join you with our condolences to the families of not only those that lost their lives, but those officers and those individuals there, because, at some point that goes beyond being a job. I mean, you're putting your life on the line inside of that. And who could have ever anticipated something like that happening in these great United States of America at our capital? And it says something to us like we probably have never heard before. These are the times that tries men's souls. This is the words of Thomas Paine. And that's where we are today in our society. And these are the things here. I do believe this, that these times here, these are the times, the things that are happening. These are to be the times that shed labels. We are to shed labels when injustices and these type of atrocities happen. We shed our labels. We shed our labels. It's no more Democrat, Republican. It's no more this, that. We are human beings. We are citizens of this great planet. And we have to look at the humanity of each and every life that is affected by these type of actions. And for that reason there, I do believe that tonight's show definitely has to be dedicated to the fact of what happens next, what
Yeah.
what precipitated this, and why there must be action going forward.
Yes, when I was watching it, I was watching and I just could not believe what was happening. I watched movies like White House Down and
Oh yeah.
Olympus Has Fallen, and I was like, oh, it'll never happen here in the U.S. I'm so glad it's a movie, but to actually see it going down like that, I was afraid for our democracy. I was afraid for those that was standing in the gap protecting. I was afraid for those who were innocent bystanders that might have been on the streets at that time. I was afraid, and all I could do was think about God's word, Second Chronicles 7:14, that says, "If my people,
Yes.
which are called by my name, would humble themselves." I felt myself go down into prayer and started praying because of the fact that it was just so overwhelming. The only place I knew to look was to God because it was so unbelievable.
Yeah, it's funny that you went to the movies like White House Down, Olympus Has Fallen, all those things there. And the relief in watching those movies is that we knew they were movies.
It was a movie.
And that would never happen here. But to see it played out, if you're like me, I'm watching because I was there watching, if you would, the confirmation, or watching, if you would, the certification of the electoral college votes. And that's what I was there. But seeing these things happen at the same time, and I knew at that point that what was literally happening in front of our eyes was literally an insurrection, and it could not be true happening in America. So we're still pinching ourselves, we're in disbelief, but at the same time, we saw something that we would only have seen in some third world country or some dictator country or some banana republic. And folks, I'm telling you, it is a serious moment. It's a serious moment for all of us. That's why I said this is the time to shed labels, because this impacts everything that you and I have ever known about democracy, everything that we've ever known about the Constitution, even as oppressed people of color. If nothing else, we always believe that at least the last line of defense would be our Constitution. That there's just certain things that could not happen that we were protected by. But we have seen that being pushed to the very brink. And in a matter of less than 12 months, we've watched this country reach different inflection points on different levels. And you've got to ask yourself a question. How many inflection points can we continue to have back to back to back without seeing the very fabric of our country being challenged to the place of break? And we've got to be ready to respond.
Well, one of the things I didn't want to happen was for us as a people, as a nation, to give up on going to the polls and voting. And I'm so glad that so many in droves went to the polls, that it was so unbelievable that the president could not believe that he did not get reelected. So I don't want anyone to get discouraged about voting. Every time there is an election, go to the polls and vote. I would prefer you to go to the polls as opposed to sending in an absentee ballot, because those are suspect as if they would be counted or not. So if you can cast your vote, go and vote. And remember all that's going on right now. Remember all of the opposition that we're getting from our governors and senators right now. Remember them when it's time to go to the polls in 2 years and back for the presidency again in 4 years. Remember this.
You know, Dr. Val, that brings us back to even our guest tonight. When the last time that we had him on, he was with us right before the election there in November. And he did such an awesome job in encouraging people why to vote and get out to vote and what was at stake. And it was so exciting. And we said then that on the other side, after the election, we'll have you back on. And what we didn't realize at that time is that we're still dealing with the aftermath of the election today. And it's just awesome. You know, Joe Gibbons is he's a former state representative here in the state of Florida. He's a man who have served in the House. He's a man who have been a part of not only legislation, but he's been a part of being a voice for the voiceless. Joe definitely represents the underdog in the sense of the fact of believing that the real government is as it was defined, of the people, for the people, and by the people. And Joe has been that voice inside of that. And though he's no longer holding public office now, he has always been very much involved in making sure both on state level, city level, if you would, local level. And for that reason there, you know, we're glad to have him back with us tonight, because the fact Joe is right in the midst of this. And like ourselves, he's been very shocked about it. We got an inauguration that's coming up in if you would, in 8 days, the inauguration. But all the things that have happened, particularly a week ago tomorrow, 6 days ago, our nation underwent something that we could not have even imagined. So we're glad today to have with us tonight our guest, Mr. Joe Gibbons, as he joins us again. And Joe, welcome back. We're always glad to have you back with us. And boy, I tell you, November looked like it was so far away now.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's a real pleasure to be with you and the good doctor, because I loved your passion for the people, the fact that you want to get information to the people. You want them to have as much firsthand knowledge as they can have. You dig and you do your research and you do your homework before you come on here. So I'd like to compliment you on the fact that you are prepared for this conversation, that you really want people to know, because we all know that knowledge is power. And as Christians especially, it's a part of our charge to be as knowledgeable as possible, so we can be as powerful as possible to do the will of the Lord right here in our community, right here on this earth. And that's what this is really all about, because we have a charge. God has given us different abilities, all of us different abilities. It's our responsibility to take the ability that He's given us and use them to the maximum for the benefit of the people. That's our charge, and that's what you're trying to do, and that's what you're actually doing. And I'm so just honored to be a part of the conversation. As an introduction, You mentioned the inauguration. Well, I'm supposed to be at the inauguration next week. I'm supposed to go. I have my reservations. I have my hotel reservations. Everything is set. With the shock of what happened a week ago tomorrow, my friends, my wife, everybody's questioning whether or not I should go because of the natural fear that people have for what might come, because there's been so much of the unknown, of the unknowable that has happened, that people are afraid. And I say, I have to go, because the minute we let the people
fear overpower us,
right, then they've won. Then we've given into the terrorists. That's the definition of terror. They make you do things because you're afraid that you would not normally do. They alter your way of life. So that's not going to happen with me. And I'll tell you, I really feel strong. I'm a very devout Christian. God has a plan, and his plan is for me to go, so I'm going.
Absolutely. Listen here. Hey, if those hotel room is booked, you're going to take advantage of it.
Booked and paid for.
Exactly. Okay. That is for sure. But, it's interesting that we sit here, 8 days away from the inauguration, a time that should all be so excited, not only for the historical nature of this particular election here, in this election here, where we're going to have, for the first time in our nation history, a woman vice president, and happen to be a Black woman in terms of that. And this should be a moment to be celebrating. This should be a moment of new beginning, because what I tell people is that when you have a person like Kamala Harris, who's been elected as your vice president, it speaks hope to every minority.
Yes.
It speaks hope to every
Absolutely.
aspect of our society, because what we have to admit is that for all of these years, our nation was ran by white men. White men. Up until the year 2008, it was ran by white men. When the posters of all 40, when it shows 45 presidents, only one person of color out of all these years. And now to say that since 2008 to 2012, and now we're coming into 2021, we now will have a vice president who is a woman, who happen to be a woman of color, who represents voices that have not been heard, represents voices that oftentimes they didn't believe that it could matter. We should be preparing for a great celebration, and yet and still we find ourselves bunkering down because of the fact of this domestic terrorism that is happening. And I think what is so important about this, Joe and Dr. Val, is this. For so long, we have seen them try to use fear in talking about terrorism. And the whole policy, Muslim ban, and all of these things here, and yet and still, our greatest threat of terrorism is coming from our own shores, and coming from people who want to carry Confederate flags, people who have an agenda, who don't believe in justice for all, who believe that there's some type of entitlement that gives them the right to be above others, and even a right above the will of the people. Historic election, Joe. We knew that it would be. Yes. Historic election. We're talking about more people voted in this last election on a national scale than ever before in the history of this country. To think that you had literally nearly 100 or over 170 million people to vote. Unheard of. And yet it's still, at the end of the day, to have a president to say, I won and you did win, to continue to say the election was stolen, and every opportunity being given to prove that it was stolen was found null and void. The Supreme Court and many other federal judges that you appointed for this very reason. And they all was at least willing enough to open their eyes to the truth and say, you don't have a case here.
Yeah, but he's depending on that underguarded movement that he's created over the last number of years, and also on a number of people who've always been that way. He just gave them permission to come out and let it out. He's depending, his whole plan was, if he did not win, he would awaken them and free them and let them loose on the American people, especially on the Congress and on the duly elected people of this country. And, there's a threat on Kamala Harris's life. There's a threat on Joe Biden's life right now.
Right now.
Right now. And see, that's a part of the intimidation. That's a part of the terrorism. And that's why I'm proud that Joe Biden said, hey, we're going to have this inauguration and we're going to have it outside where it's supposed to be. We are not going to let terrorists terrorize us to change what is supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen that way. And what they're trying to do is scare people to death. Joe Biden will not be afraid. Kamala Harris will not be afraid. And you know what? The American people are not afraid. I think there's more of us than there are of them. That's all I'm saying. And they just been released. He just released them. And he was depending on them. He sat there and watched last Wednesday in the White House on television while this happened, instead of letting the National Guard go, instead of trying to get Mike Pence and his family. He sat there and watched this on TV. Now, there's something psychologically wrong with you if, in fact, that's where you're coming from. And I'm here to say, listen, they ought to impeach him. He needs to be impeached. Everybody says, why should we impeach him with only 8 days left to go? Well, let's talk about impeachment for a second. What is impeachment? Impeachment is where a legislative body charges an elected official with misconduct or crime. Now, in this case, the House of Representatives will impeach him and charge him with one count. Then it goes to the Senate for trial. In order to remove him, the Senate has to convict him. In the last impeachment, he was impeached in the House. They sent the letters and resolutions of impeachment over to the Senate, but the senators refused to convict him. Mm-hmm. So therefore, he stayed in office. Here we go again. Now, he will be impeached tomorrow for sure. Right. They have enough votes to impeach him. It's going to go to the Senate. They can actually, when it goes to the Senate tomorrow night, they can actually call it up on Thursday or tomorrow night and start that trial and make it and make quick work of it. It's not going to happen because Mitch McConnell, even though he's showing signs of turning against Donald Trump, I don't think he'll bring it up fast enough. But fear not, because they don't have to dispose of it by Tuesday. What can happen was, first of all, Speaker Pelosi doesn't have to send it over to the Senate tomorrow, even though she can send it over to the Senate next week or next month. All right. The Democrats take over the Senate next week. All right. Yeah. So Chuck Schumer becomes the leader and he can put things on the floor because Kamala Harris will be the presiding officer of the Senate since it's a tie, a 50-50 tie. Thank you to the people of Georgia for coming out and standing up for what they know is right. Talk about voter turnout. Talking about voter turnout. I mean, they must have had 2,500 of these on there talking on programs like this, telling people to go out to vote because people went out and voted like never before. And because of that, we see how important our vote is because of what happened in Georgia. Right now, Mitch McConnell cannot hold up the George Floyd law. He cannot hold up all those pieces of good legislation that have been passed and been sitting there waiting that would help the American people, waiting because he refused to bring them up. Right now, they can bring them up. And it's only because the people of Georgia got out and voted. And I have to give a shout out to Stacey Abrams. She did. I tell you.
Yes, a champion.
She is a champion. She is really a champion. And she didn't do it alone. There are some other people
others that were working, doing the grassroots.
They really got down into the grassroots because they did.
All of those that did the grassroots throughout the entire presidency election and all, there were people that were working day and night to make sure that individuals got to the polls and voted.
But here's an interesting fact. There were 100 and some thousand people who were qualified to vote that did not vote in November. Those people voted in this election.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had a program, they contacted, I don't know if it's 150, 200,000 people who were eligible to vote, but didn't vote. They contacted them after between November 3rd and now and got them to vote. And that was the difference in the election. That is strategic, hard work. And that's what it takes. And I want people to know that every vote counts. This is a living example of it. And we will see the effect, the beneficial effect for our people because that happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Shout out to those officials that did not win, that conceded peacefully and accepted what was in hand. Thank you so much for doing that.
you know, throughout our history, there's always been winners and losers, no matter what. You know, when the campaign, there's a lot of money and a lot of time and energy go inside of that. We remember when the Bush-Gore election happened and was, you know, right here in the state of Florida, particularly even Palm Beach County, where we dealt with the hanging chads and all those things there. That was a bitter time. That was a painful time. That could have been a time of great division in our country. And yet it's still the class act that Al Gore was at the end of that, because it was the first time in our nation's history where we did not have an elected president. We literally had a selected president.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Selected. And so, but Al Gore, in the spirit of democracy, in the spirit of unity, began to quote the words of Stephen Douglas, where he says that, you know, there's more that unites us and that divides us. It is time that we move on and that we come together. We were reminded of the fact that he was my opponent, but he wasn't my enemy.
Right.
We've lost that. John Kerry, when he lost his election bid to Mr. Bush, listen, once again, though very hard fought, we roll up our sleeve. We admit that I've lost. It's been a great campaign, but the people have spoken. That is the pattern that we've always followed in democracy up until now.
Mm-hmm.
The people spoke, and yet it's still, we had a president that continued to say that the election was stolen and the people did not speak. Every recount, the state of Georgia ought to get the prize for how many times they did a recount, and each time it came out the same or even greater, if you would, and they won. Our democracy worked when it is allowed to work.
Right.
And that is what makes what has happened, what we're dealing with now, such a problem, is because of that it worked. It worked greater than we could ever think. We found out the power of a vote this time like never before. Your vote counted. Your vote made a difference. It moved the needle inside of things. Shout out to people like Latasha Brown, the founder of Black Votes Matter and everything. Yeah. She's a young lady who has an incredible history of herself, knowing what defeat was, but never gave up inside of these things. And so where we are now is that people have to understand democracy is being threatened, because when you start circulating and spreading disinformation about the fact that the election was rigged, it was stolen, it was taken from us, and that was prepped before one vote was ever cast. That was prepped and put in the atmosphere before there was ever one vote ever cast, said that if I lose, the election was rigged. In other words, but if I win, everything is all right. There's been nothing to prove anything that was said. And yet and still, there was a circus, and there was an echo, a chorus of other, if you would, Republicans who decide they would continue to echo that lie, that somehow another election was rigged and it was stolen. And it stoked the minds of those who could not accept the fact that there was a defeat, who could not accept the fact that this man lost. Not only did he lose, he lost by nearly over 7 million popular vote. 7 million people, 7 million more people voted for Joseph R. Biden and Kamala Harris than voted for him. Now listen, that's not a small margin. That's a large margin. And what makes it so incredible is that the same number of electoral votes that he received against Hillary Clinton was the same exact one that Joseph Biden had with him.
And he said it was a landslide victory for him.
It was a landslide victory then, but now the election is stolen. The reality is this, and this is especially for our brothers and sisters out there who continue to say, well, the Democrats, they complained last time as well. Complaining is one thing, but to try to convince the American people that the election was stolen is a whole nother thing, because now you're inciting doubt. Now what you're saying is that somehow or another there's a group that has done you wrong and has disenfranchised you. And as a result, you stoke the flames.
But
The flames of these individuals who have been bad seed, the Proud Boys, all of these different groups that have been out there. These groups are old civil rebel groups, and they all came from out of nowhere, but they didn't come out of nowhere for no reason. They were summoned. They were summoned for that hour. They were summoned. They was called to Washington, D.C., and they were summoned, and they was released on the Capitol. They was released on the lawmakers. They was released. And to have our president, the person who was sworn to defend and to protect the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, act like all he needed was a bag of popcorn and watch it happen and unfold on television. Why? They literally was doing his bidding.
But worse yet, he had enablers. He did not do this by himself.
Absolutely.
He had elected officials that enabled him, who also helped spread that false narrative, who kept repeating that false narrative. Even after the Capitol was attacked, when they had that vote of certification, 100 and some Congress people and I think 12 senators voted against certification. And we should remember who they are.
Absolutely.
In 2022, our Senator Rick Scott was one of them.
Absolutely.
Our former governor was one of them. I have a serious disappointment. There's a brand new Republican black gentleman from Naples who I know very well, who's Republican. He was just elected. He was one of them. And I'm going to see him when I'm in Washington, D.C. next week.
Yeah, but if that be the case, then he's not truly elected either, because if the election was rigged, then he shouldn't have gotten in office.
Exactly. But how can he go along with them? Somebody I know, somebody who's a part of the Florida Legislative Black Caucus, and I just can't believe that he would go along with this whole charade, this whole enabling. And then even the congressman from Ohio today on TV, when they had the what's the name, conference, I can't think of the committee that meets the rules. Right. The rules committee met today. Absolutely. They had the rules committee meeting today. Jim Jordan from Ohio, the ranking Republican member on that committee, even to this day in that meeting, would not come out and say that the election was fair and Joe Biden won and Kamala Harris won fairly. Even today in that rules committee, he ducked it, dodged it. He would not say it. So what I'm saying is they have not given up. Right. But they have not given up until Joe Biden is sworn in. I still don't trust those people because he had too many enablers raiding the Capitol. Somebody on the inside had to help them. How did they know where the different Congress? How did they know where Nancy Pelosi's office was? How did they know where?
Yeah, I wondered about that. I was like, how did they know exactly where to go? And my whole problem with this whole situation is the fact that we are Americans fighting Americans. We're not across the water. We're not international. We are here in America, and we are fighting each other. Republicans and Democrats have always coexisted. We agree to disagree peacefully, but now we're at odds. Our nation is divided, and we need healing. Our word for Americans is in God we trust. Where is the trust in God?
Right now we have
and it also says follow peace with all men. So here we are at odds in our nation and not following peace with all men, and we are not trusting in God.
But you know what? We have to hold everyone accountable. To me, we can't heal fully until we hold those who are guilty accountable, and they should serve some kind of consequence. Because if the problem that we've had is we've let him go
too often.
President Trump go pushing the envelope every year, every month, pushing it further with no real sanction or punishment. And that's how we got here. So if in fact we want to heal, we have to deal with enablers. We have to deal with the people who are on that street. They have to be held accountable, because we can't heal unless we first make ourselves known that this was wrong, this was a crime, there's a rule of law, and we cannot let our rule of law for Black people, they don't let us go on anything. Those were white people that stormed that Capitol. Right? If we let them go, those senators, those Congress people, those enablers who continued to tell a lie and voted not to certify, but question it, they are enablers. They're guilty because they helped spread the disinformation that Donald Trump spread. Because they not only did they hear him say it, they had some of their own elected officials who were representing them in Washington, D.C. say it. So they enabled it, they pushed it along, and to me, they have to be held accountable, just like Donald Trump has to be held accountable.
Well, I'm glad you said they, you know, people, because it's not a white thing, it's not a Black thing, it's not an orange, blue, or green thing. It's a people thing. They make choices, and they made a choice to not do what was right as it relates to the Constitution of America. They made a choice.
But we can't just let it go.
Oh, we can't let it go. Absolutely not. Because if we let it go, it's actually signing on it and say we agree with it. And that's not who we are. Anytime we don't like something in our government, okay, then we get together and we overthrow it. Then where's our power?
Right.
You know, and if you don't like something, you're going to overthrow the police, and then you're going to turn around and call them when there's a problem in your home, and then wonder why they're not coming. You know, we have to be woke when it comes to this.
Think of Black Lives Matter. Think of Black Lives Matter in this past summer. Think of that. We did things the right way.
Absolutely.
There are ways to protest to your government.
And we're still assaulted, even though it was peacefully.
Exactly.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? It's so that you bring that up, because this summer we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, and there was peaceful protests. We understood there was a call of unity like we've never seen before in this country.
Everybody.
Here is the thing that happened on last week. We saw some of the planners and those that was a part of this whole insurrection made sure that we understood that stop calling this a march, a protest, or rally. Right. They made it very plain to let you know, no, we are going to have our president or we're going to die. It's going to be one or the other. And they made it very, matter of fact, they said this is war.
Right.
They made it very certain and very clear to us that this is what this was. Our problem is for those that say, well, look at it, you're just trying to divide the country. The man only have, 8 more days in office. Why are you doing this? Because to not do it is to co-sign on this type of behavior. To not do it is to say that you can get by with not accepting the results and just get your group of people together, overthrow government, cause loss of lives and bloodshed, and it's all right. No, it needs to be recorded in history. The man needs to be permanently marked that he could never, ever, ever run for office again. It needs to be made known, because you betrayed the trust of the people, and you betrayed and walked away from your responsibility as an elected officer of this country. This is what happened. If we don't impeach, because I would have loved to see Deputy Vice President Pence go ahead and invoke the 25th Amendment, but he didn't. And you would think about it. I mean, his life was put in danger. This mob came in looking for him and hanged Mike Pence. This man was left. His family left out to dry. This president set him up. This president made him the fall guy for those people that he incited, because he kept insinuating that if Mike Pence does the right thing, I'm depending on Mike to do the right thing, he can make this right, and knew that Mike did not have the power to do so unless Mike himself tried to defy the Constitution. The thing about it, Mike Pence versus Donald Trump, Mike Pence is a politician. He understood the Constitution. He's read it. He knew where his limit of his powers were. We have a president that I don't believe ever read the Constitution. Ever read the Constitution. It was never about an office. It was about power, authoritarianism, and that's what we saw. We saw from the time he lost this election in his heart. How do we know? We know that he lost it in his heart because he stopped doing anything presidential from the day he lost the election. The pandemic went off the rail. He did nothing, said nothing, didn't address the country, didn't do anything. He went into hiding, silent. He soaked like a baby, stopped governing the country. Everything was happening because his issue was not a matter of being president. It was a matter of having authority
Maintaining
and
power.
And that's what we've seen happen throughout. And if people can't see that, even up until this point now, it's been about power. The American people, our children can never come to accept that this is the way government run. If you don't like it, just get enough mad people like yourself that doesn't like it, and let's just overthrow the will of the majority of the people. And we cannot afford to do that. I do believe tomorrow that when he is impeached, we have heard already that even Mitch McConnell has said that he's glad that he's been impeached. He agrees that what he's done is impeachable. We've had Liz Cheney, the number three person there in the House, as far as Republican, who have come out and said she will vote for the impeachment. So there is some momentum that's picking up. But isn't it amazing? So many are still scared. I have to give McConnell this because McConnell actually offered an olive branch to the Republicans. And what he said was that he believed that this impeachment is necessary to, if you would, to purge Donald Trump off the GOP, the Republican road, purge him from the party. Smartest thing he could have said for them, because what he said is, listen here, we didn't always agree with everything he did, but we went along with it because it did benefit us in the long run, because we also benefited from that power. But what he understands, that power corrupts everything.
Everything.
And guess what? They're going to have to rebuild this Republican Party, or we're going to have a nationalist party.
You're right. You're absolutely correct.
Because what we have Republicans is what we have right now. And until this happens, they have to impeach him. He needs to be removed. He needs to be stained. And folks must understand why this is necessary. The behavior we've seen over the last 4 years it's not becoming of any leader. We saw it back in that time. This man was not fit to be president. He was never fit. He was never fit.
And the other part to that too is that after he leaves office, if he's not impeached, he receives a salary for the rest of his life. He'll have insurance benefits. He'll have Secret Service at his disposal. All these perks when he waged war against America. So they don't want, the House does not want to pay him to do what he's doing against them, and they're protecting him, they're shielding him. So that's another reason why they want to impeach, so that he would leave with none of those benefits.
And he's not finished the whole pardon thing yet either.
Exactly.
That's the whole pardon thing. He is not finished. I don't put it past him to pardon his kids and try to pardon himself. It's not going to work.
Well, that's a question I have too. Is like, if he's impeached, he can't pardon himself, or can he do it before he's impeached? I mean,
he can try. He can do it before he's impeached. He can do it. No, he can do it before his Senate trial. So if the Senate trial doesn't go until next month, he can impeach himself, but it won't stand up. It won't stand the muster of a court challenge, and it would definitely.
Okay, so my question about that is, okay, so if Biden is in office on the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And he has what, until the 20th to try and pardon himself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And his family and his kids. And he can pardon all these people getting arrested right now for carrying out his duties until the 20th. All these people, the FBI is hunting down those people who've been arrested so far. The guy that got caught from Florida with Nancy Pelosi's lectern trying to walk out of the Capitol. People, he can pardon them all until the 20th. That's why he has to go now. Because the power has power until the 20th. So the things he still can do and will do, and it's going to get worse after he gets impeached tomorrow.
Absolutely.
He is talking about unhinged. He's going to be so angry and so frustrated that he's going to do some very bad things. And that's why I think we all have to be on duty and alert, not just in DC, in Tallahassee, and capitals in Michigan, and in Georgia, and capitals. They have threatened to move against all 50 capitals in the different states if he gets impeached. And I don't put it past, there's a lot of these right-wing militia in all states.
Right.
Well, you know, they tried it a few months back in Michigan.
Yeah.
He told them to go to Michigan and pull the governor down.
Yeah, no, they would take her, try her, and shoot her and kill her. They would hang her. They had people at her summer home on Lake Michigan. They had it all plotted out where they were going to take her. They'd already scoped it out. They'd already done everything. So I'm saying to you, there are people like that, like we're in Michigan, they're in Florida, they're in Georgia, they're across this country. And the time for us to deal with that is now.
Absolutely.
It's brought to the surface. We have to deal with it.
Yeah, we have to act now. And that's the thing that people, that's why I tell people this is beyond party. See, if we keep trying to, we've got to once ago country over party. What happened when, country over our party, country over that, inside of that? I often say, I grew up in Alabama, and I look at my journey in life, understood that we were already oppressed and there were certain freedoms that we did not enjoy. However, it was something understanding that I still believed in the Constitution, because it was that one last line of defense that said to us that, listen, it's going to keep us right. It's going to keep us from just being thrust back into slavery and thrust back into those type things there. But when we see things happen where there's an insurrection that happens that says, no, we're not going to listen to the will of the people. We're going to go around democracy. Everyone is unsafe. Everyone is unsafe. And we see it happening. Traditions have been broken since this man has come into office. And the fact of the matter, of course, I wouldn't want him to be at the inauguration right now anyway, considering what he has done inside of inciting a riot. But to be a president who says, I will not be at the inauguration of Joe Biden says a lot about who he is. It's one of the most shining symbol of our democracy. It's the way America have always had the peaceful transfer of power. How one person comes in and leave and it's peaceful. That's not what we're experiencing this time. No. We're not experiencing that. Matter of fact, like yourself, Joe, I don't think it's over with yet. I don't. I think the dog whistles have been sounded. I think that marching orders have been given. I think that the fear tactics, all of it is coming out of the woodwork, and we're seeing America is worse. When we saw the disregard for law enforcement, the officers there, when we saw the disregard for all that, I watched people destroy television and camera equipment that belongs to reporters simply because they could. When I saw people just totally disregard, and yes, the FBI now is saying that definitely they're questioning more because there was some inside thing. There was apologists that was even amongst the service people there that was taking selfies with some of these people here inside of this. So we understand that we got some things that are happening that if we don't take action, we have just co-signed on it. And not only co-signed on that, but we've co-signed on future attempts to overthrow government, future attempts to do exactly what's happening. They wanted to divide this country, and that's really what's happening. The divisive nature. The populist agenda. Be very careful. We knew when we heard "Make America Great Again." Really? What did that really mean? What did it really mean? It might as well have been the theme song from the Dukes of Hazzard. Just a good old boys, never meaning no harm. And no, it was that sign, America first. Look at what happened with that agenda. Totally alienated us from allies, totally alienated us from people that we work with, countries and stuff that we've helped liberated. America became weak in the eyesight of so many.
Yeah, we were exposed.
Yeah, because we had a madman.
We were no longer fear.
TV
But
star to take over the head of the country.
Right.
injustice with one is injustice for us all. So we
Absolutely.
can't pick sides. We can't co-sign with this racism because it doesn't matter. As we could see, whether you're white, black, regardless of your nationality, regardless of your party lines, if you don't like something, they're inciting that this is how you handle it, and this is not acceptable as an American person.
Well, that's what we're
You
doing.
cannot do this.
Because you know what? Silence is consent. And this is called, this speaking out that we're doing tonight. We are not consenting. And we're telling
Right.
the people, the listeners, do not, we are not consenting. We are not consenting. We're not going to be silent. We're going to speak out every time we have the opportunity to speak. We're going to speak because we will not co-sign for something that we know is wrong. And we have to try to root out the evil. Because there's a real evil there that needs to be rooted out in order for us to make the ground safe again.
Absolutely.
So what's next? What do we do next as a people?
As a people, well, we have to stay engaged. We have to pay particular attention to what's happening right now. You know, that's why it's very important that we know who our elected officials are. You know who your congressperson is. Is it Lois Frank? Who is your, is it Ted Deutsch?
Right.
Is it Lois Frank? Who is your, is it LCAC? Who is your congressperson?
Participate.
You have to. And you know what? You have to let them know because they need support now. Calling their office, sending emails. They need to know that they have support because their lives have all been threatened. They're telling them if they go to the Capitol next week, they can be killed. Kill all the Democrats. If they try to enter the Capitol, kill them. So they have to know that the people are with them, the people are behind them, and they do not have to be afraid. They have support. The people they are representing, they are really representing by going forward and doing the will of the people that voted for them, that put them there. Because remember, they work for us.
Absolutely.
So you gotta do your job. All jobs are not safe. All jobs are not safe. There are threats that come along with the job, and this is a threat. And I'm telling you, I am
Not like this before, though. This is at a whole nother level right now.
But you know what, though? There's no ceiling or a bottom to evil.
Mm-hmm.
There is no ceiling and no bottom to evil. Evil is evil. And we cannot let evil conquer us. We got a God on our side.
Yes.
Right.
We have a God on our side. That's who we lean to. Now's the time for us to lean on God. I gave Donald Trump over to God when he got elected because I was so frustrated knowing the kind of man he was that it was destructive to me to keep railing about him. So I only had one place to go with him. I had to turn him over to God and let God do his will. And God has done his will. God is doing his will. And he will continue to do his will. And so where do we go? We pray and we support our elected officials. We know who they are. Speak out. How many times have we written letters to the editor of the news of the
Right.
Post?
Okay.
How many times have we done that?
That's true.
If you pick up the paper every day, there's a letter to the editor. How many of them are from us? How many times have we written op-eds, letting them know our opinion? I have. I've had 3 published in the last 9 months in the Palm Beach Post. That's only because I know. But so it's our job to let people know. And that's a good question. What do? We speak out. We take advantage of every vehicle that we have available to us to make it known where we stand, to make it known that we are not going along with this. This is not what we want for our country. And we know this is not who our country is. And we want our country to be just that, our country. So we got to participate. We have to tell it on the mountain. Let everybody know. When you preach a sermon, let everybody know.
Right.
That's why you're preaching a sermon. The sermon is that there are teachings in the Bible that tell us how to deal with this, really.
Absolutely.
The Bible tells us how to deal with all kinds of evil. This is not new evil. This evil has been around for ages, for centuries. We see mighty empires fall.
Right.
So what do? We make sure that, number one, let's look at our teaching. What have we been taught? What have we been told to do? Let's do what we've been told to do. Let's do what we've been taught to do. Mm-hmm. And that will guide us. That will guide us. And we cannot be afraid. We have to speak up, speak out, and contact those in the government to let them know where you stand, where your congregation stands, where everybody stands. If you've got a platform, you got 100 people, then you got to speak for that 100 people. You know, we have to be a lot more interactive with taking advantage of things like the Palm Beach Post, writing letters, taking a stand. That's what we have to do. That's exactly what we have to do. Otherwise, we just cannot sit by and be observers. We got to be movements.
You know, Peter admonishes us in scripture to be sober and be vigilant, knowing this, that our adversary is going through like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Now, here's two things inside of that roaring lion with all that noise that is happening. What we have to do is from a ground level is this. Number one, we've elected officials all over. So because we've elected those officials, we must hold them accountable, but they're not silent in moments like this. They're not silent. That's why I say to those that may have voted on the other side of the aisle, yet and still, if you have voted for someone who is complicit and have gone along with this misinformation and this divisiveness of this president, you've got to come back and say, hold up. In what way have you emboldened this man? In what way have you co-signed on this? Because you definitely, your silence gave consent. Whether you was afraid of his face, were you afraid of all that? But why wasn't you afraid of the will of the people? Why wasn't you afraid of the condition of that it left our people in? And we have to do so. We cannot remain silent. We know the whole thing that evil prevails when good men and good women remain silent. And so we have to not only continue to set up, and I'll say this to every Christian and to every pastor out there. Yes, we have a responsibility to pray, but we also have a responsibility to watch, to pray. We have a responsibility, if you would, is to continue to work while we're at it. You know, when Nehemiah was building the wall, they understood the fact, listen, a sword in one hand and they're building with the other. And that's what we have to be in terms of things, because of the fact we owe it to ourselves. Who will speak for us? We've got to speak because we have the word of God on our side, behind us, and we've got to be the voice that will speak up and to speak out. And this is the hour like never before. We're going to be sober. We're going to be vigilant. We're going to be vigilant, but be sober, meaning to be alert, to be aware, to be engaged. And we have to do so. And that is why this show and shows like this are important, because of the fact we're not going to sit around and twiddle our thumb and hope something happens, because in life, there's three types of people in the world. Those are the people that wish things happen. Those are people that make things happen. And there are the folks who wonder what happened. And we don't want to be on the ends, the two on the bookends.
You know, our senator, our former governor, Rick Scott, was an enabler. He voted against the certification.
Absolutely.
He represents us. He should get flooded with letters. He should get emails.
Absolutely.
You know, that's what they can do. Just go. We should flood him with calls, with emails, because he is representing us, and he's saying, on your behalf, I'm voting to not certify that election.
Right.
And like I said, when the election comes around again, remember them. This is how we use our power. Remember the names, go vote. Here's what we do know. What we do know is the elections across the states were not rigged. Absolutely. Here's what we do know, that millions have died because of this virus that could have been prevented. It could have been cut off. Here's what we know. Millions of people are out of work and living in poverty under this administration, not the incoming administration, this administration. So when we're standing, fighting and marching and saying, oh, this one, you know, the election was rigged, remember where we are. We're dying because of the virus. We're losing our jobs because of the virus. Our homes are being lost because of the virus. You know, our savings are depleted. Our stocks are gone. Remember where we are. And remember the millions of dollars that were spent to try to overthrow this election, and there are people sleeping on the street and in their cars. And you want to spend millions of dollars instead of getting it to the people just to prove a point so that you can have power. This is what we do know.
But not
And
just
what are we going to do about it?
right.
What are we going to do about it as a people? I say we educate ourselves, know who's in our community, educate ourselves so that we can learn how to work with our hands when everything else shuts down.
Yes.
Empower and inspire within your household. And the only way you can do that is through knowledge. Educate yourselves. Turn off the television and stop watching other people's lives and educate yourselves. Create businesses and empower your family.
Absolutely.
This is what we need to do as a people. And by all means, all of this has taught us one thing that we can do is pray. I think it has brought us closer to God as a nation because we can't help but pray. And
Absolutely.
this is what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Any closing remarks?
Well, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being that voice, for being in the community, being that voice, educating people so that they know what to do. A lot of times people have not had the exposure to things that you've been exposing to.
Right.
Dr. Thickler, you've been really laying down a couple of historical facts. Those are things that people need to know. So let me thank you for exposing people so that they can think and learn and know, and educating them for the things that they can do to make all of our lives better, to make the country better.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, I tell you what, we're praying for you, and we're asking the listeners to pray for you as you make your way to the inauguration next week.
Yes.
That you're going without fear, but you're going with the wings, with the wind of prayer behind you. You're going with the protection of the angels of God with you, and you're going understanding there's a mission and there's a purpose. All of your years of experience and being involved in government from local level to state level to now even dealing with the federal, it has been for such a time as this. And we know that it's important. So we bless you. We salute you as an ambassador of not only goodwill, an ambassador of hope, but an ambassador that is going, that understand it is imperative that fear does not triumph over our faith and over our hope, because that which has been established was once established because of the fact we had the faith to push beyond what was then the status quo. We cannot go backwards because of domestic terrorism. We must continue to move forward. And so we look forward to you, again, and hopefully be able to have you again after all of this is over with, the inauguration is over with, and we can come back and get some feedback about what's happening, because we're going to keep very close eyes on the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration. And we're going to do all we can, not waiting with bated breath whether or not they fail or succeed, but putting our shoulder to the plow to be able to do our part on our ground level.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your prayers. I tell you, it gives me, there's a feeling of empowerment. Just the fact that I have the opportunity to do it and to be there.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to say to all of you that are listening in, tuning in, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what political background or political walk you have. Remember, together we will stand, and divided we will definitely fall. This has been another Hot Topics from the Soul. And I'd like to say again, thank you, Joe. And so glad to have you back, Dr. J. I was lonely without you.
We're
so
back
glad to have you. But we're going to end with a quote from Dr. King. It is said, it is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for all people. Martin Luther King Jr. We're going to be celebrating his birthday next week, and we're going to continue to pray and watch until we meet again. Good night, and God bless.
God bless.